All right, welcome to another edition of AP World Screencasts with Mr. Reyes. Today we're talking about the rise of the Islamic world. We're going to try and have some fun. I'm going to incorporate MC Hammer, the Buddha, Jesus, Antonio Banderas, and a lovely white elephant named Abu Abbas. So sit back, relax, listen, munch on some Oreos, drink a Dr. Pepper, whatever you need to do to stay in tune to some new knowledge being dropped on you right now. Let's start. The big idea. What we're going to see is that the rise of Islam goes right along with the rise of the Arab people. And starting in the 7th century, they create and conquer this massive empire that spans from Spain to India. And even though it will ebb and flow throughout history, it creates a permanent cultural anchor for people all across Eurasia and even into North Africa. And it fills a void that unites people that was left after the classical civilizations declined. So where does it all begin? In a place that is considered to be marginal, the Arabian Peninsula. Now, Christianity starts over here in Palestine, but at least it's part of the Roman Empire. It's not the center of the Roman Empire, but it's part of it. Islam starts out in the desert outside of the Byzantine Empire. It's marginal. They don't have a big empire. They don't have a great leader. They're actually Bedouin nomadic people who are very fragmented, a bunch of different clans. And they're always, dealing with the Sassanids and the Byzantines in trade, but those are the major powers in the area. Now, what it does have going for it is that places like Mecca and Medina are important stops on the Indian Ocean trade route. And if you're trying to spread stuff, ideas, religious beliefs, goods, merchants are good. They take things and they trade and they deal, and this will help Islam spread. Now let's look at how it starts. So even though it's marginal, they will come to conquer both the Sassanids and the Byzantines and a lot of other people. And it all starts with this guy right over here, Muhammad. His message was simple. We need to return to the values of hardcore monotheism. Not this weak monotheism like Christianity and the corrupted monotheism of the Jewish faith. It is a new revelation from Allah or God given to his last prophet. Not necessarily better or more divine than the other prophets, but the last and final word comes to Muhammad, which is why, Abraham, Moses, David, Jesus, they're all respected in Islam, but they're not the last one. They don't have the final word. Muhammad, a little bit of background on him, he's actually an orphan that goes to live with his uncle, is a shepherd for him, takes care of his flock, grows up to be a merchant. Then all of a sudden, he starts to be troubled. Okay, he sees a lot of social inequality. Maybe his roots as an orphan allowed him to sympathize with people. Who knows? But he's so bothered that he would go and wander out in the desert to meditate and think about this kind of exploitation he sees going on in places like Mecca. And on one of these trips out into the desert, he has a revelation from the angel Gabriel who tells him to recite and gives him a new message to take back, a new faith to take back to the Arab people that will eventually unite them and appeal to them. Now, Muhammad, he's in a pretty good position because his wife, Khadija, is a very successful merchant, and he's a member of one of the more powerful tribes, the Quraysh tribe. But it's not all, peaches and roses for Muhammad as he spreads his message, and we'll talk about why later. Some other aspects of his message. He actually shares a commonality with Jesus and Buddha. They're males, these younger-ish males, by today's standards they're young, that leave and go out into the wilderness and have some kind of experience and come back and bring a new message. And the religions that start with these one people. And that doesn't happen anymore in the modern world. We don't do that anymore. And these aren't just random little movements that start. These are major world religions that are very much practiced today. Now, they become so successful because their messages are universal. Islam is universal. Everybody can be a good Muslim. Do the 5 pillars. Recognize Allah as God and Muhammad as his prophet. pay your tithings and do the Hajj, pray 5 times a day, all that stuff that you need to do, you don't have to be a certain race or social class. He also appeals to the poor. It's anti-wealth, exposes the crime of or sin of usury, exploiting people through high interest rates. He emphasizes a very personal inner struggle to submit your will to Allah. That's what the term Muslim is. It's one who submits. And also, that missionary aspect that they have to convert others, the struggle against unbelief, the struggle against pagans who don't believe in God, or polytheists, or Christians and Jews who won't convert. Now, they do everything from debate with them, Islamic scholars like Ibn Sina or Averroes versus Jewish scholars like Maimonides and Christian scholars like Thomas Aquinas. But most of it is done through conquest, especially as Islam begins. Now, it doesn't start easy for Muhammad. He's saying that, the wealthy are committing these sins. And although it plays well with the poor, the elites don't like his new message. Okay, they don't like it enough to force him out of Mecca to travel to another city named Medina. This is known as the Hijra. It happens in 622, and it is the first year in the Islamic calendar. It is where Muhammad really begins to build up his ummah, his super tribe, and by collecting basically some elites, but mostly commoners from every tribe, giving them a unifying force with a new religious belief. He's eventually able to battle elites and take on the Jews who won't convert. And unfortunately, he planned to include Jews because he thought they'd convert, but they don't. So he stops having Muslims pray towards Jerusalem and has them start praying towards Mecca. This is an example of how Islam is Arabized and becomes more linked to Arab culture and tradition, as we'll see more of as we study Islam. Now, in 630, he comes back to Mecca, conquers it, reclaims the Kaaba, which was a sort of traditional polytheistic Arab religious shrine. He turns it into a shrine for Islam, and people still go there today on their pilgrimage, their Hajj, and it's included in that whole ritual. Now, he sets himself as the Caliph, which is a religious and political position, and he's very different in Christianity and Jesus in this sense that he has a political role to play. Now, he dies in 632, and as we'll see, the question about who will rule after him becomes very significant. But for now, we're just going to look at the continuation of his conquest, because after converting much of the Arabian Peninsula, he will move, or Islam will move beyond. And by 636 and 637, conquers the Byzantines in Anatolia, the Sassanids in Persia, and makes it all the way out to Central Asia and defeats the Chinese at the Battle of Talas River in 751. Islam spreads all over Eurasia. Now, this specific battle is important because it leads to the conversion of the Turkish people, who become a major player in Islam. Now, there is some resistance. After conquering Persia, he runs into resistance from Zoroastrianism, Zoroastrians who don't want to convert. After the spread of Islam through North Africa into Spain, many Spanish Christians would rather die than convert, so there's a big thing of martyrdom going on. And then as Islam is pushing into France, they get stopped by the hammer. Nope, not that hammer. This hammer. Told you I'd get MC in there. Charles the Hammer Martel, who defeats the Islamic forces at the Battle of Tours in 732, creating one of the great all-time questions in history. What would have happened if the Muslims would not have been defeated there and the hammer would have been driven back? And would Islam have permeated all of Europe? We will never know now, thanks to Charles the Hammer Martel. Now, as the empire grows, it becomes defined by two dynasties, the Umayyad and the Abbasids. The Umayyad were really good at expanding the Islamic empire, but they weren't good at ruling the empire. They don't last for very long, as you can see, less than 100 years, primarily because they can't incorporate new people, non-Arabs, Shiites. They treat them as second-class citizens. Now, they do make a good move in moving the capital to Damascus because it's more centralized to the empire, but they can't hold on and collapse by 750. The Abbasids take over, learn from the mistakes of the Umayyad, move the capital to Baghdad, and promote cosmopolitan multiculturalism, give access to non-Arabs, especially Persians, go easy on the Shiites, use the ulema or religious scholars to rule over and interpret law and do that. And they also create the position of vizier, a position that, although holds no religious authority, is a key political advisor to the caliph. The Abbasids usher in an Islamic golden age. They have poetry, poets like Ibn Fadlan, who become an envoy and travel long distances and oversee trade between everyone from the Vikings to the Franks. Here's Harun al-Rashid. Here's Charlemagne. They communicated and they traded stuff. And on one of the gifts that Harun al-Rashid sends to Charlemagne is a white elephant, hence the term white elephant gift. And they even named him Abu Abbas, so he had a name. Now, Ibn Fadlan also, he's a poet, but he shows that they get all the way to the Vikings. And there's a horrible movie called The 13th Warrior that's based on Ibn Fadlan, where Antonio Banderas plays an Arab who goes and meets Vikings and then ends up helping them defend their land against cave-dwelling bear people. They also develop math and medicine. They preserve Greek knowledge, especially Aristotle. They love them some Aristotle. They produce a lot of art that's based on geometry because they don't draw human forms. They create madrasas, universities that open up learning opportunities for women. And like we talked about, long-distance trade. But there are many problems, specifically the rift between Sunnis and Shiites and who should rule. Okay, we've talked about this already. Sunnis go one way, Shiites go other, and the two never unite again, leading to assassinations and fights for power and civil war. Now, that's made worse by military fragmentation. Remember, they rule over different ethnicities, Persians and Turks being two of the big ones, and they vie for power in the military that makes them weaker. Now, the Turks become so powerful that they're able to create their own kingdom and have their own leader called a sultan that they forced the Abbasid Caliph in 1055 to recognize. And by 1258, after killing a messenger from the Mongols, they moved through the Islamic Empire and sacked Baghdad, marking the end of the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258. Now, the Abbasids are down, but they're not out. Even though their golden age is over, Islam becomes permanently entrenched throughout Eurasia and Africa, becomes one of the major world religions throughout the world, not just in that region. All thanks to one man and his vision and his work. He changes the world forever. It's a fascinating phenomenon that changes world history. Thanks for watching and listening. Have a nice evening.